The neighbors swore they heard a scream. Not just any scream, but the kind that splits a quiet suburban night in two, shrill and panicked before being cut off mid-breath. The kind that makes your blood run cold, but not quite cold enough to get you to actually dial 911. Until it's too late. Typical neighbors. Inside the perfectly ordinary two-story brick house at the end of Willow Lane, nothing was ordinary anymore. Emma Callahan lay sprawled on the hardwood floor, her brown eyes wide, glassy, unblinking. A crimson streak painted its way down her temple, pooling darkly beneath her hair. Hovering over her, chest heaving, shirt clinging with sweat, was her husband, Mark. And no, this wasn't some twisted roleplay gone wrong. Mark told himself it hadn't been planned. Oh no, this was definitely not premeditated. He was a good guy, remember? That's the script he'd clung to for years. But as he stood there, hands trembling, he couldn't stop replaying the last 15 minutes like a broken cassette tape. 1 minute, Emma was rifling through his phone, her brows furrowed, lips trembling as message after incriminating message from Claire lit up the screen. The next, she was staring at him, her face painted with betrayal. And then her voice, a whisper sharp enough to cut him in two. How long have you been lying to me? Now let's pause here for a second. If this were a movie, this is the part where Mark would sink to his knees, confess his sins, cry ugly tears, and beg for forgiveness. Roll credits, lesson learned. But this isn't Hollywood. This is real life, and real life is messy, and as it turns out, fatal. Because instead of apologizing, Mark froze. He thought of Claire, 10 years younger, blonde, dangerous. The type who laughed at all his mediocre jokes and whispered poison into his ear, "You deserve better." Emma had suspected something for months, but tonight she had proof. And then she said the words that set the entire tragedy into motion. "I'm leaving you, Mark, and I'm taking the kids." It was like dropping a lit match into a puddle of gasoline. His mind went blank. Rage, or fear, or both, boiled over. He lunged forward. She tried to storm past him, phone slipping from her hand and skittering across the floor. She shoved him. He shoved harder. And then the crack. Her head slammed into the corner of the coffee table. Silence swallowed the room whole. Just like that, Emma was gone. Mark staggered back, chest heaving. He hadn't meant to kill her.
Really, he hadn't. This was supposed to be an argument, not a homicide.
But there she was, lifeless, her body crumpled in the same living room, where they'd celebrated Christmas mornings with the kids. He dropped to his knees, whispering her name, shaking her shoulders. Nothing. Panic tightened around his throat like a noose. And then, the sound that shattered him. The faint shuffle of feet upstairs. The kids. 6-year-old Sophie, 9-year-old Ben. They had heard. Mark scrambled to his feet, his brain firing in 1,000 directions. If they came down now, if they saw their mother like this, there would be no undoing it. No cover story clever enough to erase the sight of their dead mother on the floor. He dragged Emma's body toward the kitchen, her lifeless arms thudding against the floor, leaving a gruesome streak of blood in their wake. He needed a plan. Something. Anything. Before the world collapsed in on him. But it was already too late. "Mom?" Ben's voice floated down the stairs, innocent, sleepy. "We heard a bang." Mark froze, his heart pounded in his ears. And then Sophie's tiny voice followed, soft but piercing. "Is Mommy okay?" He turned, blocking their view of the body, forcing a smile that looked more like a grimace. "She's fine. She fell. Go back upstairs." But kids aren't stupid. They knew. Ben's eyes glistened with tears. His little voice cracked. "You hurt her." The accusation landed harder than Emma's head on the table. And then the phone. Buzz. On the floor where Emma had dropped it, the cracked screen lit up with a new text. "Claire, so did you tell her yet?" Mark's blood ran cold. Buzz. Another text. "Don't chicken out on me, she deserves to know." Oh, the irony. Emma did know, just not in the way Claire imagined. The phone buzzed again. A call this time. Claire. Mark snatched it off the floor, declined, and shoved it into his pocket. He grabbed the kids by their shoulders, steering them upstairs as Sophie whimpered and Ben resisted. His voice cracked into something wild. "Go to your room. Don't come out, do you hear me?" He locked their door from the outside. His children cried on the other side as he leaned against the wall, shaking. He couldn't let them talk. couldn't let them ruin what little chance he had left. He stumbled back to Emma, dragged her limp body out the back door. The night air hit him like a slap. Wet grass, cool breeze, the faint sound of crickets, all of it so infuriatingly normal compared to the chaos unraveling inside. And then, headlights. A car pulled into the driveway. Claire. She stepped out, her blonde hair catching in the streetlight. Lips curled in that dangerous smirk that once made him feel alive. Mark? She called softly, a teasing lilt in her voice. Why didn't you pick up? You weren't supposed to ignore me. And there she was. The woman who had started it all. The woman Emma had died for. Claire had no idea that just a few feet away, Emma's bloodied body was lying in the grass. Mark's pulse thundered. His shirt was smeared with blood, his hands trembling. And in that single horrifying moment, he realized Emma wasn't the end of this story. She was only the first chapter. Claire's heels clicked against the driveway like a ticking, clock counting down to Mark's undoing. She tilted her head, the streetlight catching her smirk in a way that made Mark want to simultaneously kiss her and strangle her. His shirt clung damp to his skin, smeared with Emma's blood. But of course Claire noticed none of this. She was too busy basking in her own self-importance. Mark? She called again, her voice playful, like she'd just arrived at some secret rendezvous and not, a crime scene. You weren't ignoring me. Were you? Ignore her? Oh, if only she knew how much he wished he could ignore her, forever. Claire had always been chaos dressed in perfume, and tonight she'd strolled straight into the epicenter of it. Mark swallowed hard, forcing his trembling hands behind his back like a kid caught with stolen candy. Only instead of candy, it was his dead wife cooling in the wet grass. Minor detail. Claire, he rasped, voice cracking like a bad radio signal. What are you doing here? She rolled her eyes, flicking her blonde hair over her shoulder. What do you mean? What am I doing here? You didn't answer my texts, or my calls. You think I'm just going to sit around and wait like some pathetic side piece? Please. Oh, the irony. If she only knew what those unanswered texts had cost Emma. Claire strutted closer, heels sinking slightly into the grass. Mark's chest tightened. Too close. Way too close. Any second now, she'd glance down, see Emma's body, and scream. And then it would all be over. Jail. Headlines. His kids growing up, with whispered words like murderer and monster. Attached to their last name, he stepped forward quickly, intercepting her path. Stop! Don't come any closer! Claire froze, blinking at him. Then she laughed. What's wrong with you? You look like you've seen a ghost. Mark's jaw clenched so hard it hurt. If only. A ghost would have been easier to deal with then, Emma's blood drying under his fingernails. He forced a weak chuckle, the kind that sounded more psychotic than casual. Rough night. Claire narrowed her eyes, suspicion flickering across her face. Rough night? Mark, you're sweating like crazy! And her gaze swept lower, lingering on his shirt. Is that blood? His stomach lurched. He opened his mouth, ready to spit out some half-baked excuse. But Claire cut him off, her smirk curling into a knowing grin. Oh my God, did you finally do it? Did you actually tell her? Mark blinked, momentarily stunned. That's what she thought? That Emma's blood on his shirt was just metaphorical fallout from a messy breakup? For once, Claire's delusional self-absorption worked in his favor. Yeah, he muttered hoarsely. I told her, Claire squealed, clapping her hands together like this was a baby shower reveal and not, the aftermath of homicide. Finally. Mark, I knew you had it in you. Oh, she must have freaked out. What did she say? Mark's throat constricted. Oh, she freaked out all right. The kind of freak out you don't recover from. The kind that ends with a sickening crack against a coffee table. She didn't take it well, he said carefully, the understatement of the year. Claire pouted dramatically, like Emma's grief was just a minor inconvenience. Well, of course she didn't. Nobody likes being dumped. But honestly, she'll get over it. Women always do, and now we don't have to sneak around anymore. She leaned in, lowering her voice to a sultry whisper. It's just you and me. Mark's pulse pounded. Just you and me. The phrase twisted in his gut. He glanced at the grass behind him, Emma's lifeless hand peeking out. Pale against the dark, he shifted his stance, blocking it with his leg. Claire's eyes glittered with excitement, completely oblivious. So, where is she? Did she run off to her mom's? Slam a door in your face? Throw your clothes out the window? God, I almost wish I could have seen it. Mark's laugh came out jagged, sharp, completely unhinged. Yeah, he croaked. Quite a scene. She leaned closer, tracing a manicured finger down his arm. And now she's gone. Which means you're mine. Gone. The word clanged in his head like a church bell. If only she knew just how gone Emma really was. And then, a sound sliced through the night. A faint thud. From upstairs. The kids. Mark's blood turned to ice. He'd locked them in their room, but kids are resourceful. If Ben had managed to pry the door open, if Sophie had cried loud enough, Claire would hear. She'd know, and everything would come crashing down. Claire tilted her head, frowning. What was that? Mark forced a smile, his voice sharp, desperate. Nothing, just the house settling. But Claire wasn't stupid. Self-absorbed, yes. Oblivious sometimes. But stupid? No, her eyes narrowed. House settling doesn't sound like footsteps. Mark's chest tightened. He needed to think fast, to distract her, to steer her far away from the house and the truth clawing its way out from inside. But Claire had already started walking toward the back door. Toward Emma, toward the kids. And Mark realized, with bone-deep dread, that his night of mistakes was far from over. Claire's heels crunched against the gravel as she veered toward the back door, suspicion hardening into curiosity. Mark moved fast, stepping in front of her again. His arms spread wide like some pathetic bouncer at a nightclub no one wanted to get into. Claire, stop! His voice cracked, the plea crawling out of his throat like a dying animal. She tilted her head, her smirk fading into irritation. What is wrong with you tonight? You're acting weird. And seriously, what's with the blood? Don't tell me she scratched you on her way out. Did Emma get a little feisty? Oh, Claire. If sarcasm could kill, she'd be lying next to Emma by now. Mark forced a laugh that sounded less like humor and more like a death rattle. Something like that. Claire narrowed her eyes. She wasn't buying it. She brushed past him, and for one horrifying second, Mark thought she'd trip right over Emma's body in the grass. But instead, her attention snagged on the faint sound again, the muffled crying from upstairs. Her brows shot up. Wait! Are the kids here? Mark's stomach plummeted. His mouth opened, but words refused to come. Claire's smirk slithered back across her face, slow and wicked. Oh my God, you didn't just tell her, did you? Her voice dropped into a conspiratorial whisper. You made her leave. With them. You chose me. Mark blinked. Leave? If only. Emma had left all right, just not by choice. And the kids? Well, they were still upstairs, probably terrified and praying to a god. Mark was pretty sure had clocked out for the night. But Claire bought her own fantasy. Of course she did. She always lived in her own little world where everything revolved around her. Wow, she breathed, her grin stretching wider. You really did it. You finally grew a spine. Mark forced a nod, his pulse hammering. Yeah, that's exactly what happened. And for a moment, just one blessed, temporary moment, he thought he might pull it off. Claire was buying the lie. Emma's body was hidden in shadow. The kids were locked away. Maybe, just maybe, he could bury this whole nightmare before it buried him. But then Ben's voice sliced through the night like a dagger. Mommy, please wake up! The sound carried down the staircase, out the cracked upstairs window, and straight into the backyard. Claire froze. The smirk slid off her face. Slowly, she turned to look at Mark. Her eyes, wide and glinting with dawning horror, flicked between him and the patch of grass behind him. And then she saw it. Emma's hand, pale, still, reaching out of the shadows like a final accusation. Claire's scream ripped through the night. Louder than Emma's had been, raw and piercing. Mark lunged, clapping a blood-slick hand over her mouth, dragging her back against him. Shut up, just shut up! But Claire thrashed, her nails digging into his arms, her muffled cries tearing through his palm. Her eyes locked on Emma's body, on the blood, on the truth spilling out in front of her. Mark realized with a sick jolt that his secret was already gone. Claire knew, and Claire, of all people, was not the type to keep quiet. So he did what he always did when cornered. He panicked. He shoved her, harder than he meant to. Maybe he only wanted her to stop screaming. Maybe he just wanted a second to think. But her heel caught in the grass and she went down, skull cracking against the stone edge of the garden bed. The silence that followed was deafening. 2 women, 1 night. 1 man with blood on his hands and no plan left. Mark staggered back, his breath ragged. His mind spun, clawing for a way out. Call it an accident? Blame it on Claire? Stage a burglary gone wrong? He was running out of ideas, and out of time, because upstairs the kids were still crying. And now the neighbors, the same ones who ignored the first scream, they weren't ignoring this one. Porch lights blinked on across the street. A door creaked open. Voices drifted into the night. Mark's world was collapsing faster than he could patch it together. And yet somehow, by the time the sirens finally wailed down Willow Lane, he almost pulled it off, almost. He dragged Claire's body beside Emma's, arranging them like some grotesque tableau. He tried to smear the blood, scatter the scene, make it look like a violent break-in. He rehearsed the story in his head. They came at me. They attacked me. I was defending myself. I had no choice. For a moment, staring at the mess he'd made, Mark actually believed he could sell it. He could still be the victim. The grieving husband. The man who tried but couldn't save them. But then, Daddy did it. The words came from the porch, small and trembling. Ben stood in the doorway, Sophie clutching his hand, their faces streaked with tears. The neighbors froze. The cops froze. Even the sirens seemed to quiet for the truth to land. And just like that, it was over. Mark Callahan wasn't the victim. He wasn't even the grieving husband. He was the monster. And no amount of lies, no clever cover-up, no mistress spinning fantasies of a happily ever after could change what his children had just revealed. The cuffs were cold against his wrists as they hauled him away, his neighbors watching in horrified silence. He wanted to scream, to explain, to insist it hadn't been planned, that it wasn't supposed to happen this way. But deep down he knew. Emma's scream, Claire's smirk, his children's cries. That was the soundtrack of his undoing. Mark Callahan almost got away with murder. Almost. But in the end, it wasn't the cops or the neighbors or even Claire that brought him down. It was the one thing he never could control. The truth.